Hey guys, this is Nick Christopher from Mob Tales. Hope you guys doing well. Please like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Today we have a very interesting guest, Michael from Connolly, if I'm correct. Um, Came out with a very interesting book called Blood on the Badge, which I'm very familiar with. The background. It's about Lou Ippolito and Lou Caracappa, who were disgraced detectives who worked for Gas Pipe Castle, Anthony Castle for the Lucchese family. So, Michael, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for having me. Nice to be here with you.
Oh, pleasure. Well, before I want to ask a couple of questions first. If you can give us a little background on your writing career and how you got started in writing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a newspaper guy. I used to work at the New York Times and I worked at UPI, which is a wire service like the Associated Press. And I worked as a baby reporter at Time Magazine back when Time Magazine was the thing. And this is my fifth nonfiction book. So I wrote a book about the first case of criminal profiling, the first time that the police went to a psychiatrist to catch a serial offender. I wrote a book about Murder Inc., the assassination arm of organized crime in the 1930s and 40s.
Yeah, I
And
remember that book,
yeah, it was called A Brotherhood Betrayed, came out.
Brotherhood Night. Hmm.
Yeah. And
That was more about Abe. That was more centered about Abe
yeah,
Rellis,
that's
right?
right. Abe
Yes.
Reles, or his nickname was Kid Twist,
Right, Kid
was
Twist.
the head of what they called Murder Inc., which was really a Jewish gang in Brooklyn. And Abe
Right.
Reles spent his entire life killing informants, and then became the biggest informant of all. And the police were keeping him sequestered in a hotel in Coney Island. And then early one morning, he mysteriously went out the window of his hotel room. The police called it a suicide, but I don't think anybody thinks it was a suicide.
No, it was no suicide.
There was no suicide either. But the question is, you know, did the police let the mob come in to throw him out the window? Did the police throw him out the window? Probably some combination of the two.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you probably agree. If the law enforcement had the technology they have now, they'd probably be able to figure it out. But they
Right.
didn't have that then.
Right. They didn't, this is the early 40s. They didn't have anything really.
Yeah,
So
pretty much.
that officially that was a suicide, as you know, but nobody will ever really know what happened. So that was my fourth book, and then this fifth book, as you mentioned, is about Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracappa, two
Mhm.
decorated detectives in the NYPD in the late 80s and early 90s who were secretly on the mafia payroll. They were employed by Gas Pipe Queso, the underboss of the Lucchese family, and they were passing sensitive police, FBI information to Gas Pipe, who was who was under investigation, whose phones were tapped, who was about to be arrested, but most importantly, who in the mafia was a rat, who was secretly working with the government, who was cooperating. And what's more, Eppolito and Caracappa would then they would be paid a bonus to facilitate either the abduction or the murder of those rats. And they got away with this for a long time. They did this for more than a decade, and it's kind of really amazing if you think about it, what they were doing and how they got away with it for that long. They really pretty much got away with it until they didn't. They had retired and they were living in Las Vegas when they were finally caught and indicted.
Well, yeah, that's true. the interesting thing is there was other books written about this. Even Louis Polito put his own book out called Mafia Cop. And the individual that you also mentioned in your book, who well, a book was written about him as well, was Bert Kaplan, who was
Right.
actually the intermediary between Casso and Ippolito. It was a major player in this whole thing because if it wasn't for him, Gaspar would never know about these cops. Um, I mean, he didn't even know who they were in the beginning. He didn't know who their names were. And it's interesting that a Lucchese associate, a Jewish guy no less, was the was the real go-between a gas pipe and the Ippolito and Caracampa. And what I find fascinating, and I've read all these books, even before yours, and yours is very interesting because, which is titled "The Blood and the Badge." For anybody who's listening, great book. I've read like halfway through it already, and I love it. It's a lot more detailed, whereas the other ones, you kind of go behind the scenes, and you go back to when it all started, how it started. In other words, step by step. This is how it happened. This is how Ippolito and Caracappa, even Caracappa and Ippolito, before they even got hired by the cops, by Castle or Kaplan, they were doing stuff on the side even before this. They were already on the take. If
Yeah,
if I'm correct.
yeah, they were already involved in stuff, and we don't know. I mean, we know some of the things that they did, but not all of them. I mean, Louis Eppolito was caught passing a police file to a Sicilian heroin dealer named Rosario Gambino. So the FBI and the New Jersey State Police raided Gambino's home in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And to their astonishment, they found that Gambino had his own police file in his
Mhm.
possession, or a copy of it. And then they found that Eppolito's fingerprints were on the file, on the papers. And so they really had Eppolito caught dead to rights. He was passing police information along to a known mob associate. And of course, he was brought to internal affairs, but amazingly, internal affairs dismissed his case. Not only that, but they promoted him to detective second grade. And not only that, but they let him pick whatever precinct he wanted to work in. Of course, he picked the 6-3 precinct in the heart of mafia territory. But why did they do that? Why did he get away with
That's a good question. That's a question
it's
I love to ask because
yeah. I mean,
his
I don't.
fingerprints from the damn file.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, he
mean,
gave
he
it to
was caught. He was caught. But I mean, I think the answer to that is, I mean, as best I can tell, I spent a lot of time trying to figure this out. Um, I think the answer is that the police, Benjamin Ward was the police commissioner then, and he just didn't have any tolerance for another corruption scandal. He didn't have the tolerance for more embarrassing headlines in the New York City newspapers about police corruption. So they kind of tried to sweep this under the rug and hope that it would kind of quietly go away and make Eppolito happy by promoting him. But it turned out to be a really critical mistake, as you know, because Eppolito, along with his best friend and partner Stephen Caracappa, they went on to be in the World Series of corruption. They went on to engage in what many people would say is the worst case of police corruption in New York City history, or maybe in the history, police corruption nationally. And this was one of their chances to catch him, and they botched it.
and for people who may not know, Rosario Gambino was no small time guy. He was the head of the Cherry Hill mob, which was Gambino, an arm of the New Jersey crew. And Rosario's not, like I said, he's just Carlo Gambino's relative. This guy was huge,
Yeah.
it connected with Sicily. This guy wasn't small. That's why I'm shocked at the high profile guy they had in their hands, pretty much, and how they just, like you said, let it slip under the rug. It's just incredible. To me, it's amazing, And that was, I think, in the mid '80s, correct? If I'm right?
Yeah, I can't remember. I think it's 86 maybe.
Yeah, it was
And
in the mid
I
'80s,
mean,
something like that.
well, years, decades later, um, the families of the victims that Eppolito and Caracappa were involved in killing would sue the New York City Police Department. And part of what their case was based on was that the city had this chance to catch Eppolito and failed to do so.
Right. What do you think was in the mindset? I mean, Stephen Caracalla was very different than Ippolito.
Yeah,
Ippolito was brash, loud.
yeah.
He was this. He thought who he was. And Caracalla was all, very quiet, very pristine, very clean. They had very different personalities. And what do you, in your opinion, in your research, Ippolito was you kind of understand the road he kind of took and the kind of person he was. But Stephen, how do you, is that psychological? Is it like
It's really a good question, Nick. It's really, I've thought about this a lot. Like you say, they were opposites. I mean, they were like Laurel and Hardy, and like a lot of partners, they were like complementary parts. They were opposites. Eppolito, like you say, was a loud, boorish, vulgar guy, the kind of guy who is, in the bar room telling loud, dirty jokes. Caracappa was the opposite, always meticulously dressed in a dark suit.
oh, you froze, Michael.
What's that?
Oh boy.
Say it again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got you. You froze for a minute.
Oh, I froze. Okay. So Caracappa was quiet to the point of almost being mute, but very, very intelligent and always watching what was going on around him. And it's worth noting Eppolito was born into a mafia family, strangely enough. He was the son of a Gambino
Yeah,
capo.
Jimmy.
Yeah, that was his uncle. Jimmy was his uncle, Jimmy the
Right.
Clan, and his father
Hmm.
was known as Fat the Gangster. So he was born into a mafia family and he rebelled against his family after his father died of a heart attack. He joined the police department. His friends and family couldn't believe it. This was an unthinkable betrayal of his family. And then it's like a lot of people can't escape their families. He went on to become a successful cop, a successful detective, but his family kind of reeled him back in. And I think in his mind, there was always some confusion about whether he was a mafiosi masquerading as a cop or if he was a cop who was kind of pretending to be a mafiosi. Caracappa, like you say, is a little harder to figure out. I think, I talked to a detective once and I asked him, why do you think Caracappa did this? And he said, for the money, of course. I'm not sure that it's that simple. I think that there was some way in which Caracappa liked having this secret life. He liked pulling one over on people.
Maybe so, but the thing with Lou, why would you think the police department would hire somebody who is not? I mean, this guy's blood related, not just a second, third
Yeah.
cousin, a nephew from another uncle, whatever. This guy's directly blood related to Fat the Gangster, Jimmy Appolito. And why would they hire somebody of that stature? Wouldn't they stop and think, wait a minute, this guy can play for the other team anytime he wants, and we won't even
Yeah, I
know?
mean
Like, why wouldn't?
it's a good question. I mean, Eppolito lied about his family background when he applied to the police academy. They may have known who he was in any case. Caracappa applied to the police academy the same year. This is 1969. So this was a time when the Vietnam draft was taking away a lot of candidates that might otherwise have joined the police department. And at the same time, the police were under a lot of duress because it was a time of enormous protests in New York and in the
Oh
country,
yeah, the civil rights. That's
civil
right.
rights and race riots. And I think the police department would have taken just about anybody who came along. I think they really were desperate. They were desperate for recruits, and so they may have known what about Eppolito's family and figured they didn't care. And also, Caracappa had a felony charge as a teenager, as like when he was 17 or 18, he was caught loading stolen construction materials into the back of a rented truck. That felony charge was dismissed. He went to Vietnam, but still, you would think that that might be a disqualifying event for him, but they both went right into the police academy.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible to say the least. Um, when when you went into decide to work on this book, first of all, what was your motivation?
Well, good question. I mean, as you mentioned, a lot has been written about this before. Um, and it wasn't exactly a secret, right? The New York City newspapers covered this case. But my feeling, I mean, what I said to my publisher was, I don't know if anybody's really written like the big definitive book on this topic. And a little bit of time has passed. And so what happened was that a lot of people who might not have talked to me 10 years earlier or 15 years earlier really opened up. I mean, I spoke to a lot of people who never had talked to anybody about this before. In some cases, there were
You froze
detectives
again,
who
Michael.
had worked on some elements of this case and they'd never even talked to their wives or their family about what they were working on. And now these guys, retired FBI agents or detectives, they're retired and they're a little bit older. And they, for whatever reason, maybe just for history and posterity, they were very cooperative and they told me. So there's a lot in this book, a lot that has never been written about before.
Yeah, it's true. It's like I said, it's different than the other books I read about. Even the one called The Good Rat by Jimmy
Yeah.
Breslin, which is about Bert.
Hmm.
Um, you go more like, I mean, like I said, you went way back, like when Lou
Yeah.
was growing up, when Steve was growing up, which wasn't really discussed prior.
Yeah.
Their desire to be detective, to go into the police academy. So that wasn't discussed prior at length, outside of Lou's book. Um, now, when you were willing to approach Eppolito's family, like his daughter, and I know you got some pushback. Um, what what were you hoping to receive to get from Caracapa's family or Lou's family? I know you spoke to Lou's son, I
Hmm.
believe. I'm not sure how much he might have known or told you, but um, based on that facts of some pushback on that,
Hmm.
if you were able to speak to them, what were you hoping to get?
Well, I mean, what I was hoping to get was some intimate sense of the men, right? I mean, we know from public records, from what's been written about them in the newspapers, we know from trial transcripts, we have a certain public familiarity with their public image. But what we don't know so much is the little like telling details about their family life and their personal life. And it's not like that's some kind of titillating detail that I was after. It's more like what was revealing, like what was the real person. when the TV cameras were turned off outside the courthouse. That's what I would have been after. And as you mentioned, I did speak to Louis Ippolito's son, Lou Jr., his son from his first marriage. And, it was very moving and kind of touching because he was estranged from his father. And he didn't have a particularly good relationship with his father. He hadn't been in touch with his father really for years. And when his father went to trial, he came to the courthouse every single day. And what he said to me was he came because he sincerely wanted to know what his father had done. And he sincerely wanted to know if his father was innocent or guilty. Um, there's a certain way in which my approaching the family members was a formality, by which I mean I kind of knew what they were going to say for the most part, right? They had said it all before. They'd said it to the New York Post and they'd said it to the Daily News. I never formally interviewed Stephen Caracapa's widow, but I did have some email back and forth with her, and I kind of knew what she was going to say. So, in a way, in a funny way, those kinds of interviews, I think, aren't that helpful. But I mean, you have to try to do those conversations. But in a way,
Hmm.
like I say, they're not that helpful because they're like Caracapa's widow was just going to say that he was innocent. She was just going to say that he was framed. And Lou Ippolito's daughter was really his spokesperson outside of the courthouse. Every day after court had concluded, she would stand out in Cadman Plaza in Brooklyn and speak to the press. And she was a very formidable and striking figure out there and charismatic. And so she was on the public record a lot. I mean, she was in the newspapers a lot. So I kind of knew what she was going to say. But that's a long-winded way of saying I would have asked them, I would have asked them about about what it was, what their family life was like, what revealing stories did they have about the father's character.
Yeah, well, according to like Polito's daughter, of course, very much supported her father, and
Right,
wouldn't couldn't believe that he did any of these things,
right.
even though there was overwhelming evidence. She, totally, um, forgot not delusional. I forgot the exact word for it, but she didn't want to admit it. Didn't want to come to terms with the fact that her father did these kind of things, which is kind of shocking when they had evidence, up the ass pretty much. Um, but when it came to investigating and doing this kind of a book, I mean, I've written 5 books myself, and one of my books is about the Greek mafia and how they connected with the Italians and the Irish and the Albanian.
Mm.
I did a lot of investigating, like you, and interviewed a lot of people, so I know it's a lot of work. Um, did you? How did you come to decide who to pick to actually interview to be involved in this book? Did you? Because I know you went through transcripts and stuff like that, which I know takes a long time. I know because I've done it.
Yeah.
Um, did you had already in mind specifically who you wanted to reach out to, and was besides the Caracampa's ex-wife and Ippolito's daughter, was there anybody that you wish you could have spoken to that you didn't have the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to the first part of that, as you know from your own books, is that at first you may have some ideas about who the obvious characters are to interview, but as you do some reporting and you begin to understand the narrative, then you figure out who the characters are, and then you speak to those characters. And then you understand the story better, and then you understand, oh, that there are these other people over here who worked on this part of the story. And so it kind of your list of people to speak to grows and grows and grows as you do more and more research. to answer the second part of your question, um, you know, there's a part of this storybook which you probably remember about a diamond dealer named Israel Greenwald
Mm-hmm.
who had
Sure.
stole a stolen treasury bond in London on behalf of Bert Kaplan. Um, did Israel Greenwald know that the treasury bond was stolen? Hard to know. But when he came back from London and he came to JFK Airport, he was stopped in customs and the FBI grabbed him. And it appeared that he was going to cooperate with the FBI. And Bert Kaplan caught wind of this and hired Eppolito and Caracappa to abduct Israel Greenwald when he was on his way back to the Rockaways to his family home. And they took him to a garage where he was shot and buried. And his family never, for decades, his family never found out what happened to him. And ironically, at one point, his widow and his two daughters rented an apartment right across the street from where he lay in the buried.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember that.
I wish when the book came out, I heard from one of Israel Greenwald's daughters. I had tried to reach them, the two daughters and their mother, while I was researching this, because this is such a, there's a lot of murders in this book, but this is a particularly heartbreaking and sad story. And I really wanted to hear them tell the story. I don't think they were avoiding me. I just think for whatever reason, I didn't get through to them or they didn't get back to me. But I did hear from one of his daughters after the book came out, and she wrote me a really nice email and said, I want to thank you for writing a truthful book about what happened. So, I mean, I wish I had had a chance to speak to her. There are other people, I spoke to 50 something people. You can't speak to an unlimited number, but
Mm-hmm.
for example, gas pipe queso flipped, as you know. It
Mm-hmm.
was kind of an unthinkable thing that the underboss of the Lucchese family would cooperate. And he did this in the strangest way. He was taken in he had been caught hiding out with a high school girlfriend in New Jersey. And the FBI figured out where he was because he had this on an early model cell phone, and they were able to track his location through the cell phone. And then they had him in detention in Manhattan, and he was taken in for to do a handwriting sample. And when his lawyer was in the bathroom or went to get coffee, he quietly made a deal to cooperate because he didn't want his lawyer to know. So that's the kind of thing that I wish I'd been able to speak to all the parties, all the people involved in that. It's just such a strange, it's like a scene out of a movie, right?
Well, the other one, I don't know if you spoke to them or not. The other heartbreaking murder was Nick Guido.
Yeah.
Poor kid was mistaken, and they shot him in the car. Um, and that was another terrible event. I don't know if you ever reached out to that family at all.
I
I
did.
don't know if you did. I know
I
it's mentioned in the story. I don't know if
yeah,
you did.
I spoke to Nikki Guido's brother. His parents have both passed away.
Uh,
Just to back up for a second. So Eppolito and Caracappa passed a lot of police information along to
uh,
Gaspite Queso, as we said, and most of it was accurate. Not all of it was accurate. So
obviously.
yeah, so they passed along information about Nicky Guido, who was a young man who was part of a team that had tried to assassinate Queso. So Queso Gaspipe's trying to get back at the people who tried to kill him. One of them was Nicky Guido. He gets the information from Eppolito and Caracappa, and They go and shoot Nicky Guido. It just turns out that it's the wrong Nicky Guido. It's another young man who lives in Brooklyn, same name, but a case of mistaken identity. They shot him on Christmas Day outside of his family home after the big Christmas dinner. He went outside to show off his new car to his uncle. And, of course, that just destroyed his family. His father never, stopped taking his medications and died a couple of years later. Um, that's, we maybe we tend to think of these mafia stories as we think of them as movies and TV shows, and we don't realize what really terrible, tragic effects they can have in real life.
Yeah, that's for sure. Um, well, since the book came out, ironically enough, there's a movie coming out called Mafia Cops.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know, by Danny Apagasker, who's the director, um, which is kind of funny. It's around the same time as the book, very ironic. I'm not sure how accurate it's going to be. I don't think it will be, but I don't know if you were aware of that when your book was coming out around the same time.
No, I was not aware of it. And in fact, I don't even think that their production had started until well after my book was underway. And I think it came out yesterday. I spoke by phone this morning to Tommy Dades, who was the detective who broke
Hmm.
this case. And um, he had watched it, I guess, last night. And he gave me a little review. They don't use anybody's real names. Um, I don't know that I haven't seen it. I don't get the impression that really does justice to this story.
It probably doesn't. I haven't seen it yet. I'm not too thrilled to go see it, but
Yeah.
I might out of curiosity. Tommy Days, I happen to excuse me, happen to know. He knows me as well. I've
Hmm.
interviewed Tommy many, many years ago.
Hmm.
Um, about his work and being in the boxing, which was big for him back in the day.
Hmm.
I mean, I read that whole part about when you discussed about Tommy, how he grew up and how he became an law enforcement, which is pretty interesting. Um, Now that the book is out, how what kind of feedback have you been receiving so far?
Yeah, the book has gotten really, really good feedback. I mean, when I was working on the book, Nick, I was worried that the story was too complicated for readers to follow. I was worried that readers wouldn't stay with me. But to my surprise, pleasant surprise, people seem to have really responded to the book. So many people have called it a page turner. Um, so many people have said they can't put it down. It's not what I was expecting because it is a complicated story with a lot of people, a lot of characters in it. And so, of course, that's gratifying. People Magazine did an excerpt. I did a lot of radio shows, a lot of podcasts. So it's gotten a lot of visibility. And, this is these mafia stories, as you know better than anybody, they resonate with people. People can't seem to get enough of these stories about the mafia. And I've spent a lot of time wondering why that is.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm glad. Well, it's good that that's the case because otherwise we wouldn't be selling books.
Yeah.
But I think it's the fascination, just like The Sopranos. It's the fascination. It's like, you read a book, and when you read a book, it kind of takes you to another place. Like you feel like you're there, like you're seeing it or whatever. Which is the whole point of writing a book. You want people to feel like they're in the story themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and I've read so many books, just like you probably did, hundreds of them. My library is extensive, and I know enough about the subject growing up around those guys when I was a kid, and then writing about it. So your book is very interesting. It's a good book. It is It does turn the page. I want to read more. I want to know more. Um, but I think people should understand that Blood in the Badge is not. It's not a Godfather thing. It's not a Soprano story. It's more about. It really bases on the fact of what these two gentlemen, these two detectives did, what they did, how they did it, what other bits and parts were involved, like Tommy Dades, how he came into the picture, how his involvement. I think Tommy Dades' involvement is what really blew this thing up and really gave it more of a like, oh wow, let's look into this. I believe I think that's probably. I would think that's more. I think that's accurate. I believe. Um, so I think people would be very interested in this kind of story.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy Dades is really, truly, as you know, one of the truly, truly unusual and admirable characters. And you know, he just without him, Eppolito and Caracappa would have gotten away with this. And he happened to get a phone call from somebody. He stumbled into some evidence, and he pretty much single-handedly revived this case after federal investigators had left it dormant for 10 years. Eppolito and Caracappa had retired. They had collected their generous police pensions and moved to Las Vegas. And they had gotten away with it essentially. And then Tommy received a phone call from the mother of one of their victims, Eppolito and Caracappa's victims, and he took this bit of evidence to the Brooklyn DA's office, and the Brooklyn DA's office, Mike Vecchione, a DA there, encouraged him to develop the investigation, and without that, they would never have been, almost surely would never have been convicted.
Well, I don't want to. I don't want us to give too much of the story away, because uh, and because then people will want to read it. But if besides outside of finding the book, obviously on Amazon, um, do you have a website or anywhere where people can also look
Yeah.
into it?
Yeah, I mean, in the books on Amazon, etc., it's you can there's a if you go to if people go to my website, which is michaelcannell.com. Cannell is spelled Cannell, two N's and two L's, michaelcannell.com. There's some photos and a description of the book, and I have a pretty cool little like 1 minute video trailer there too about the story. And I think people will like that. And then there's a place where you can, like, there's a little menu of places to buy the audio book or, buy it from Amazon or from, other Barnes and Noble. So it's michaelcannell.com.
Well, if would you be doing any book signings anytime soon?
Well, I'm not scheduled to be in any bookstores. I mean, the book came out in January and it's now April, so I don't have bookstore events planned, but if people want to make arrangements with me, I'll figure out a way to sign books for them. My email is there on the website.
Okay. Um, well, Michael, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I wish you a lot of luck. And I love the book. And hopefully, when you do a book signing, you come down and maybe you can sign it. That'd be great.
I appreciate that, Nick. It's really fun to talk to you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Michael, and good luck.
Okay, you as well.